Jeffrey West is joining you here.
Hey, good afternoon.
All the way from
Or
Sweden.
morning, wherever we happen to be.
Yeah. And Jason Bowman also. And we're talking about beaten pizza. Beaten pizza? Beaten meats?
We're actually starting to get onto the topic at hand here because he's looking a little bit high at the moment. So what you're seeing here is just the segue into the topic that we're really going to hit you with today.
Which is another crop that some people in Beaton might grow. Except there's an OPP shop there, isn't there?
Correct.
I know.
Correct.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
It's no longer the biggest OPP shop in town. They have a bigger one now in Alliston.
Oh, yeah.
But for a while, Beaton was the center of the amalgamated New Tecumseh.
Right, so that's a municipality. Oh, Patricia just came in. Come on in. This is a spontaneous live radio. Yeah, we're on the air. What was that?
I don't know.
Uh-oh, we just lost... we almost lost Detroit.
No, it's a control.
So we're talking about crops and cop shops.
Crops and cops shops. And pizza. Beaten pizza.
We just can't make that rhyme.
Beaten pizza is the best eaten pizza in Beaton.
That's better.
That was my little... Because I used to go up there every day on a...
Are you really on the air?
Yeah, we're on the air. Come on in. Don't worry about it. This is the unofficial part of the show.
All right.
Yeah, come on over here. We got you all set up.
Can I
Over
leave
you.
my hat on?
Yeah, leave your hat on.
Good day.
That's
Thanks.
it.
That's Jason.
Nice to see you guys.
Jason over
Nice
there.
to meet you.
Jason?
Jason
This is
Bowman.
Jeffrey.
I'm well, thanks.
Jeffrey?
And this is Patricia.
Tricia,
She's
see, it seems like I'm the only one going naked today on the head, so it's a...
I don't
on
know
the
how to say
head.
that.
Oh, yeah, on the head.
Oh, that was so bad.
Nobody's told you.
That's
it's
like walking
cold
into
out.
it.
It is cold out there. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
look at Jeff's hair. He's got no complaints over there.
Yeah.
You know, he's got a perma hat. That's what we call it.
You know, I had to find a way to make it fit in here. If I could pull it back a little bit, I just might be able to match in with you guys.
So,
You can be different.
Gotta be.
Yeah.
Gotta be.
we're different. Do we have a good camera
Is that right?
on Patricia? Look, there she is. Locking in.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Well, do you want to start the official interview now?
what's the discussion?
Well, very good question. We're here to speak with Jason about the healthy use of cannabis, and I don't know where to start because I've heard of this cannabis, as you call it, but I thought it was illegal.
I thought there were several different varieties of the cannabis species as a plant, so maybe you can shed some light on that.
Definitely.
I'd love to. It's fascinating. Really, when you look at the history of the human use of this particular plant, being
That
cannabis.
started in the 60s, right?
Started in the 60s. Somewhere I heard it in the west coast of the United States. There were some long-haired, freaky people involved. That said, cannabis actually, in the ancient Chinese language, is ma. And so ma is cannabis. And if you look at the Chinese language structure, the verb to mill is the grinding of ma. That's they structure the characters in the language. So you can see ma being cannabis is basically the first thing that was being milled, according to the history of the language. Then you look at other verbs where ma is being added. The word millet, for example, includes ground ma. That's millet. So you see the cannabis word in ancient Chinese language, dating back thousands of years, obviously. Then you see the language, the Zendavista, for example, 10,000 most medicinal plants on Earth, being listed number one on that list, also cannabis.
What is that? Sorry, the Zen.
Zendavista was long time before Christ, apparently a Persian prophet who gave a list of medicinal plants for human use. And again, it's an ancient text, but again, top of that list, we see the ancient word for cannabis. You look at the ancient scriptures of the so-called Bible, you're again seeing the cannabosum. cannabis. You look at Sumerian translations of these ancient texts, and you're seeing stories told throughout the ages about cannabis. The language is where the devil's in the details of the translation. So over a period of dark ages in the during the Middle Ages of Europe, for example, you had the purging of the history of human use of cannabis. You had language being old texts being translated, with the real story, in my view, being lost. And slowly, over centuries, beginning with the burning of the herbal healers and the midwives in the Middle East by the so-called Holy Roman Empire, you had the essential purging of humans' natural history of their use of natural medicine. And so, flash forward to before the 60s, you had a period of time of prohibition in the United States because you had essentially ethnic groups, Hispanics in the South and descendants of the former slaves, so-called African Americans, using cannabis culturally. And basically, as that creeps into the so-called upper white society, you ended up with a reefer madness take hold where industrialists who could profit from the prohibition of cannabis. Keep in mind, Henry Ford made his vehicle parts out of the cannabis plant.
Just like Cheech and Chong.
Just like Cheech and Chong, absolutely.
What about the biblical notion that Christ used cannabis as part of his ministry? And that translation that you were referring to, that somehow that's been lost in the transcription of the texts into the modern day lexicon?
Correct. It's another good point. You can look at some ancient texts that tell stories of what this man known as Jesus did with this oil that he had access to that literally rose people from their deathbed. There's stories that even Lazarus, I believe, rose from the dead. In terms of dealing with skin issues, everything from leprosy to joint pain, inflammation, in my lifetime, I've seen cannabis work miracles. I literally have. It's not the man or woman applying the cannabis or producing the cannabis. It's a miracle worker. It's a human endocannabinoid system. All humans have an endocannabinoid system. That means that our systems, our body systems, are regulated and modulated by these connections that happen in our CB1 and CB2 receptors. Without getting too scientific, suffice it to say that without having cannabinoids in our bodies, it's akin to running an engine without motor oil. The motor oil being the cannabinoids that connect everything and keep everything flowing, keep cells permeable, it keeps mutating. Cannabinoids actually program cell death. So when you have a mutating cell in your body, and you've got the right level of cannabinoids in your system, that cell is programmed to commit suicide. Doctors and scientists refer to it as apoptic effects or apoptosis. APOPTOSIS.
So it's implicated in a possible cancer remedy scheme.
Without
from what
question.
You're saying.
My father had a late stage occult primary, which means the good doctors here at Princess Margaret could not find my father's so-called original primary tumor. So they decided in their infinite wisdom that he should have a chemotherapeutic agent known as cisplatin. And that was just up the road here. And my father thought it was going to kill him if he returned for the prescribed second increased dose of it and preferred to stay home and die. I looked to alternatives, found out about a man named Rick Simpson from McCann, Nova Scotia, who cured his melanoma by putting a cannabis extract on it.
Well, just to kind of corroborate some of the things you're saying, I did find this graphic. This is the original Sistine Chapel drawing, apparently a little bit different than what we're told these days. So obviously there's some kind of cover-up going on here. Now, wait a sec, though. But Patricia, I never heard about Jesus and cannabis. So, is there any evidence to corroborate that?
I'm pretty certain that biblical scholars have gone to the original, I believe it was written in Aramaic Hebrew, which was Jesus' dialect of the time.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that the oils, which in modern times, like the Catholics have adopted that into holy unction as a part of last rites, or like you were indicating, trying to bring the dead body back to life, that may be actually the natural progression of carrying on Jesus's work in a symbolic way.
Well, I think you're correct, and I think again, if you look to, I studied at Harvard briefly, and I knew someone who was going to the divinity school there. And when you speak with people who have gone to, a divinity school, particularly those who are interested in history and in particular linguistic history,
Yes.
now you get into a very exciting. I love meeting people like this at gatherings because we can. I like language, but I've studied German language, Ganika Haka, Mohawk language, but not. I don't understand Sumerian. I don't know Aramaic dialect, but those who do can give us very, very, very interesting insights into literal translations, which get lost when you put them as the Holy Roman Empire did into Latin and then into so-called English.
Yes.
And you read the King James version of the watered-down version, it doesn't seem to make much sense. But when you look at these ancient texts, it actually, I have a translated version of a very specific recipe for making this oil that you're talking about, and I don't mind sharing it either because it shouldn't be a state secret or a Vatican secret.
No, it shouldn't be.
It should be like Queen Victoria. It should be available to, if it was available to her for her menstrual cramps, it should be available to everybody, and not just the few who keep this sort of knowledge to themselves, in my view.
Yeah, because Queen Victoria, she used to smoke hash or something like that.
She had a good doctor, and Sir William Osler, the father of modern medicine,
Yes.
it actually could heal almost anyone, and he used cannabis and wrote about it extensively. Why modern so-called doctors, I call them white coats, don't get taught about the wonderful work of Sir William Osler and his work with cannabis extracts, why they aren't taught that the number one effective extract in the history of humankind is cannabis extract, and why they don't learn about making different compounds of this extract, in their offices and in their labs instead of petroleum-based derived toxic petrochemicals, which seem to be high profit but absolutely have devastating effects on population masses. I mean, look at ibuprofen, Tylenol, and aspirin. Aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid, is synthesized salicylic acid, which has exactly the same properties as the cannabinoids that you get naturally in hemp or cannabis. Ibuprofen or acetaminophen, both of which are liver toxic, are designed and developed to be so-called anti-inflammatory. Well, the most profound anti-inflammatory effects on a system that I've ever witnessed is from juicing raw cannabis leaf.
What if you juice too much?
You can juice all the leaf you want, and you can't drink enough to give you any effect. You can't get high from drinking cannabis juice when it's from the leaves. And I've tried.
One of the things that gets me is why. People talk about there being a crisis in rural Ontario or rural farm country.
Sure.
The farmers are in crisis, right? What gets me is why not just let farmers grow whatever they want, right? And to have farmers who might want to grow a little, even just a couple of plants or whatever, and then there's black helicopters flying over the countryside of rural Ontario,
Project
And
Long Arm.
all over Canada. For what? What a waste of money. Let the farmers grow what they want.
I couldn't agree with you more.
The only crisis that exists right now is the crisis that has been manufactured for the control and the enslavement of humanity. It is very easy, in my mind, to resolve many of the problems that are facing Canada and many communities. Hemp and cannabis represent one of those solutions. If every community was able to grow its own sustainable crop in hemp and develop their community in ways where people could train to use hemp to make fabrics, to use hemp to make body parts for cars, or to use hemp to make food, or to use hemp to promote healing.
Yeah.
Every person in every community could find a way to contribute to that. And the money that is derived from those industries would bring more funds into each community, whereby they could then purchase whatever services they are unable to provide for themselves.
Yeah.
It's a good concept. However, I have personal experience dating back a decade and a half ago where I was a member of an organization called HEMPA. And we were trying to create an economy with growing hemp. And I have a Bachelor of Science degree, so I was allowed even from the onset of becoming a seed producer. And I had 50 acres, 20 acres of tillable land. I lived in a rural community that was devastated with the collapse of the forest industry. And it seemed a natural match to bring the hemp in and use the fiber and the herds. There's all kinds of purposes, as well as harvesting for seed. And I brought in dump truck loads of manure to my property to enrich the soil, and nobody wanted to spread it for me. And it was because there was competing interests. You have a forest industry that doesn't want to see hemp get a toehold in Ontario. There was your little marijuana farmers. Hugh, they weren't real farmers. They were just people that grew pot. And they didn't want the cross-pollination of my hemp flowers with their cannabis crop. So you could see all these tensions going on. But at the end of the day, hemp is an amazing product that could solve a lot of social ills.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, both of you. And thanks for sharing that, by the way, because I didn't know I was sitting in company of an early hemp pioneer.
Yes, a wannabe.
Well,
but it
it's
wasn't, you know, how things, there's a time and a place, and we're going back a decade and a half ago, and
I was there, sister. And it's
the
an honor.
Andermans in Killaloo are pioneers.
Yep. No, it's an honor.
We tried to make concrete with the herd.
Yeah.
Because you're aware that they've found archaeological sites that were made with hemp mixed in with local aggregate, where, like, you know, thousands and thousands of years later, these structures are still standing.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I'm holding in my hand something that was prepared July 1998.
That would be around the time.
It's a South African hemp feasibility report.
Exactly.
And, you know, the South Africans back in 98 were predicting what we've seen come to pass, which is a massive global awakening, I think, thanks to the internet. But the Randolph Hearsts of the world are not suppressing
the yellow journalists have been put in the corner where they belong.
Yeah, and thanks to good work like all of you here, this message is getting out. And you know, I'm in the hemp business. I'm in the cannabis business. We have formed a society that's mandated to return cannabis to the people. This ancient systems of community empowerment, where people in communities hold power, versus the top-down
that's
approach.
Really the way it should be, right?
Well, cannabis. reason I think, and Jeffrey touched on this, that cannabis was essentially through the United Nations apparatus eliminated from Earth practically, in the dark days that are now behind us, thankfully. We're now seeing the science that hemp seed, the seed of hemp, is a 100% protein source for humans.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? That means that if you eat cannabis seed, an ounce of it a day, you don't need to eat meat. You can, but there's no dietary reason for you to have meat. Mm-hmm. You get in your hemp seed all 8 essential amino acids. You get your omega-6, 3, and 9 fatty acids in perfect ratio for human absorption. You get calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, carotene, sulfur, iron, zinc, vitamins A, E, C, B1, B2, B3, and B6, let alone all the cannabinoids. The oil from this seed is the brightest burning lamp oil known to man. The oil can be consumed, again, as a protein source, yet it's flammable. You add ethanol to this oil, and you've got a biodiesel that burns cleaner than diesel fuel.
It's amazing.
Hundreds of gallons of oil per acre in this renewable crop.
That's
that turns more. Cannabis brings in more CO2. It draws in more CO2 per acre than the rainforest.
See, that's the thing that gets me too, is that we because there was that suppression by the paper industry of the hemp industry, right? So instead of farmers, even in bad
marginal
Canadian
soil,
like what we have a lot of
Canadian
here in Canada,
soil,
right?
Ground out
they
rock.
could be growing cash crop. Instead, they're not allowed to, and we're cutting down our forests.
Absolutely,
for paper, right?
I think I hope, and I'm going to cling to this. That's the old. We just had a regime change here in Canada, and the old system of looking towards Alberta and dirty tar sand oil as salvation for a so-called economic system that's in on the over the cliff, in my view, versus someone like Mr. Trudeau, who's sitting down and having adult conversations with leaders, and I'm not here to talk politics, but I'm here to talk about hopefully some signs that I see that some change might be in the wind, because we've heard the cannabis legalization promise that Mr. Trudeau made, upon which I think he was elected. I know a huge amount of the so-called medical cannabis movement in Canada activated everyone they could to see this push, because they were so afraid of the oppression coming under the if it would have been more of the same. So that shift now has occurred. And we see today, for example, that being reported that Ontario is now going to exempt medical cannabis patients from the ban on
the smoking
using their
regulation.
medicine, publicly, which of course is again encouraging. You can take a vaporized Ventolin shot of steroids publicly without any stigma, but heaven forbid you use your cancer or epilepsy medicine in a similar way, and receive the stigmatization that prohibition brought with it. So I see these all as encouraging signs.
All right. Well, we, we're talking about all these health benefits and so forth, and it's medicine and all that. But what about the fun aspects that I've heard about with marijuana? Because not only are people, they might be treating their epilepsy or whatever, but aren't they also having a good time?
Well, I think Dr. Bob Melamedes put it the best. He said, heaven forbid that sick people should be allowed to get high, right?
Or how about living in a culture where we're the only culture in the world that we have a problem with people getting high?
Really?
I believe there's other cultures all over the world where it's just a part of varying parts of their social interaction or ceremonial times.
Correct.
To open the mind up for expansive consciousness. We don't in the North American culture. Maybe it's Anglo. Maybe it goes beyond North America to the old country, that we don't really want that, but we have no problem with people getting
drunk.
out of their tree on alcohol.
Well, it is interesting that, because when I was joking about, the 60s and whatever, but it was like at one time, seems like that it just wasn't part of our culture in the white West, right?
Yeah.
But so, is that really true or what? Because, like you said, even in the U.S., when it was in the 30s and that, because it really didn't become a major issue till the 60s, and it was a big issue, right?
That's right.
Marijuana, right? But why were, like, the Europeans, the Western people, not... If everybody else was like, why wasn't the West? Why is this an issue now? Why wasn't it an issue, or why haven't we had this in our culture for, like, ever?
Control. The group of people that have been basically controlling humanity needed to find ways to keep humans from awakening to their higher potential within. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but numerous cultures and traditions, South America, Africa, and the like, where they use the kind of herbs and plants that induce a psychological high, so to speak. This allows people to connect to the more spiritual aspect of their being. And from what I think I know, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the pineal gland in the human body is the gland that represents the spiritual connection. And as we connect more to and awaken that energy within our pineal gland, this is what the cabal is really afraid of. They don't want people connecting to this higher aspect of themselves. So they have needed to find ways to not only suppress this knowledge, but to criminalize it and find a way to profit from it. And this connects more to the whole string of effects that go beyond the mere issue of cannabis. It's the incarceration of people for profit. It's the suppression of a culture. It's the suppression of a language. It can go into a number of different directions here.
All right, well, why don't we take a little break, and we'll come back, and we'll go in all those directions. We'll ride off in all directions all at once.
Excellent.
So this is Liquid Lunch. We'll be right back, and you can check out Jason's contact info on the web there. And we're going to continue right after a little break.
We'll be back.
You're lucky, huh?
And it's gone. Welcome back to that channel. It's me, Hugh, and Jeffrey's here. Patricia's here, and we're speaking with Jason Bowman of the, lionsherbssociety.com.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay, now before we get into that, I know, Jeffrey, you just wanted to kind of elucidate on the pineal gland.
Yeah. What's really kind of important is part of the suppression has been in the fluoridation of water, because people don't realize that the fluoride calcifies the pineal gland, and this helps to limit and prevent people's access to the powers that are believed to be contained within the pineal gland. And this touches upon the agenda that is related to big pharma, big medicine, and all the other various branches that are associated with trying to suppress information while keeping people sick and ill. So I just wanted to add that point before we touch into what the benefits are of marijuana and cannabis, and this is what Jason's going to talk to a little bit more.
Well, are you saying marijuana does something to your pineal gland?
It has the potential. And I'm very careful to say that, because in terms of the spiritual journey of every individual human being, not everyone will react to something the same way. So I want to be very careful in saying it's not something that will necessarily impact everyone.
Right.
It will have some kind of an impact, but I can't say exactly what that impact will be, because it will be unique to each individual.
I just want to mention, since you're talking about the fluoridation, the other thing I heard is that actually smoking tobacco actually it ameliorates the effects of fluoride on the pineal gland. That I know.
Pure, maybe, and Jason can elaborate more on that. I can't.
And why I want to say that is because I've often wondered, why is there such a we got real problems. We got real social problems, real economic problems, like homeless people on the streets, like people losing their jobs, like declining standards of living. But the governments can't seem to do anything but pass anti-smoking legislation. right? It's like do something that actually will matter, right? You know, like let people do what they want, right? And so, but why all this anti-smoking thing globally? And I think it might have something to do, if tobacco actually helps prevent the damage to the pineal gland from fluoride in the water, then that's, to me, the only thing that makes sense. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that in there.
That's probably why they add all the toxins to regular cigarettes.
Okay, so Jason, so do you want to elaborate on all that?
I'd love to, and as a matter of fact, you've given me a great segue into this, because I think we can look at cannabis and we can look at tobacco as very similar plants for a number of reasons. One of which, the primary focus that I'll touch on is that both of these plants were consumed in North America, grown, cultivated, and consumed medicinally, culturally, and indeed spiritually since time immemorial. Long before the Europeans, long before even the stories of an ancient Chinese galleon that marooned many generations ago on the eastern shores. I've heard stories of these things, and then I've heard stories of the Dutch traders coming over, indeed the Nordic traders coming over in their stone canoes, as it's told, right? But everybody who got to North America, when we read there from Jacques Cartier's diary to any explorer's important notations about what they saw going on in Turtle Island or North America, is cannabis, cultivation and use. It made the so-called founding fathers of America so excited they were ready to declare independence against Great Britain, because Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, all of the founding fathers were involved in cannabis cultivation. Who did they learn how to do that from? And where did they get the strains from? It's a very interesting history. And the cannabis history, I've got a little bit of it up on our website. The earliest cannabis farmers in North America were called the Tuscarora people, which is the so-called sixth of the Six Nations, who I had the privilege and honor of spending time with, Jeffrey also, in Grand River near Brantford. And by connecting with these elders and by learning the history of their, not just their medicine, but their system of nutrition and their system of sustenance, without having to rely on meat. And then to see the assimilation of so-called Western culture on these people, and the devastating, I'll even argue, genocidal effects on the masses in terms of diabetes, cancer, inflammation, disorders that were unheard of. The history of the people that I know used to live to 115, 120 years of age without going to a doctor, without having a speck of vaccinations, without going to a dentist. They're living to these wonderful old ages, dying peacefully in their sleep, because they had a system. They had a system of balance. They took what they needed. They taught the people to respect the future generations. They could drink out of any river, any lake you could drink out of. Yeah. And what has happened to that system? Look around us. You can't drink anything anymore. You have to buy the water from a company. There is no place that I saw on the so-called Six Nation reservation where anyone lived where I saw a well that had water that you could drink in it. Not one. So you have people living in essentially a refugee camp scenario where they can't even obtain water in Ontario. And I agree, Hugh, there are issues. Homelessness, basically the bottom falling out of the middle class. Everything is good. Food costs soaring. People want to eat organic vegetables. They're paying in downtown Toronto. I can't even find local organic unpasteurized honey in downtown Toronto. I'm getting someone to bring it from me secretly from a farm because it's verboten, like getting raw milk. Why is this? Why are people allowing this to go on? Well, I'd have to say their pineal gland, their glands have been calcified. They've lost their sense of independence and their will to stand up. And the early experiments where I learned about the treatment of populations with sodium fluoride was actually by a chemical cartel called IG Farben. And the experiments were done at a notorious place called Auschwitz, under the eye of a man who was convicted for crimes against humanity by the name of Fritz Tiermeer, who was convicted at Nuremberg. And I studied these atrocities, and what they were doing, and they recorded their data, and they found that you could add enough sodium fluoride to the water, where you could have inmates of a facility no longer interested in escaping. You didn't need guards anymore at Auschwitz because the people were so happy and high. What's wrong with people being high?
Now, what about
That's what's wrong with people being high.
I wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit here.
Me too.
Okay.
You go.
No, you go first. You're a bigger devil than me.
No, you go.
The great warrior Tecumseh did not want his men smoking marijuana. That is documented. The indication being people high on dope aren't going to be warriors.
They won't kill people.
That's right. But at the other side of the coin, is the government allowing this widespread availability of cannabis going forward, perhaps as a way to quell dissent amongst the people about the massive injustice that we have right now in our society?
Because in a way, maybe if everybody's smoking weed,
everybody's high,
maybe everybody's going to be even more docile than fluoride in the water is going to be.
Could that be why they're adding now more beer to the liquor stores as well? I agree with you. I see a movement of an over-medicated population, and I will use my last living breath talking about the benefits of cannabis because of what I know about it now. Pardon me. That having been said, I've been living it and breathing it for a number of years, and I will be the first to point out serious issues I see in the so-called movement, serious abuse issues that I see basically giving a perverse face to what ought to be a very serious adult discussion. Giggling about Cheech and Chong aside, this is my dad would not be alive today if it weren't for this extract. And the people who were making that extract for my father were criminalized by a perverted regime that ignored the fact that this harmless medicine had such profound effects. And I now know that there are names, there are individuals that are going to at some point be held to account for what they knew and what they ought to have done given their positions and the legal responsibility that such positions hold. A doctor who has knowledge of something, who knowingly administers a noxious substance to a patient, has got an issue in my view, because I know the Criminal Code of Canada, and I know what the Criminal Code of Canada states about the administration of a noxious substance. Now, I might be in pain, and I might want to die, but I am not allowed to beg and plead for someone to give me a noxious substance, no matter how much in pain. You can't do that. These are laws that are meant to protect people from becoming victims. So if I've got cancer and I need Ceramide, because if without Ceramide my cells are going to continue to multiply, I need an alkaline system and I need Ceramide. And I go to the doctor and the doctor says, there's no research to support that you can do this naturally. He's lying. He's criminally negligent, in my view, because not only is there patient outcome study after patient outcome study after patient outcome study in Oregon, California, Colorado, add them up. Dr. William Courtney, let's just look at his case file alone. Dr. Courtney cures pediatric brain tumors with cannabis juice that we were joking about earlier. These children can drink juice and still receive the apiptic effects of cannabinoids and never get high. They get something called THCA. That's THC acid, which comes only in its raw form. You know, most human beings have never had THCA in their lives. And I can tell you what it did for me the first time I drank a shot of it. I felt an uplifting clarity that I can't even describe. And, you know, you need to take about 15 to 20 leaves a day to juice to be able to have this profound system-wide anti-inflammatory and anti-tumor effect. Who has access to that number of leaves other than people who are growing it themselves? So all giggling aside, knowing what I know, and I can get Dr. Courtney, I'm sure, to come on here and talk about this sometime, because he's usually very happy to do it. This is real. And until we I can't get enough cannabis. This is another tragedy that's going on, is I see people come in every day, my mother, people that come in off the street, trying to access. They've heard about Dr. Courtney, they've heard about cannabis leaves. Where do you get cannabis leaves? It should be such a simple thing.
So is that the 5-pointed leaf or the 7-pointed leaf, or just one of those points?
As long as they've grown for more than say 3 weeks,
yeah,
and have more than 3 points, you're good.
Oh, but you know what I mean. But it's like it's, you know, because when you look at the marijuana leaf, it's got like 5 or 7 things, right?
Yeah.
So when you say a leaf, it's the whole. It's not just one of those segments. It's the whole.
It's like
the whole finger,
right?
the whole hand,
The
if
whole
you will.
hand.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
call
yeah.
it a fan leaf, right?
Yeah.
So they appear at the bottom, and eventually they'll just yellow. They fall off, and they actually become fertilizer for next year's crop. It's a self-fertilizing crop, which requires practically no inputs.
And that's why it's good for the soil as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, the taproot can go down up to 20, 30 feet at times, and that actually as well adds material to the soil.
Yeah, so it's a good crop to rotate just to keep your soil healthy.
Yeah.
That actually is a segue, perhaps, because you were asking earlier, Patricia, about the different strains.
Yes.
And he was bringing that up. This might be a good time to introduce to the viewers
Yeah,
the
what about
kinds of strains that you're working with.
House Pink Lizard or K-Train, huh? Are they good strains?
What did you do on the break?
You know,
You're talking
I'm missing a brownie. It's you know, actually, again, I hate to always be Mr. Serious here, but we're talking about the difference between life-saving medicine and garbage. So you can have big cannabis industry, pretty much driven by Dutch breeders, European breeders, I'll say, but primarily they're focused in Holland, which ironically somehow circumvented the whole global cannabis prohibition, even though that's where the center of the so-called International Criminal Court is located.
Maybe that's where all the international criminals are hanging out.
Yeah. Sitting in the Hague at a coffee shop smoking cannabis, looking at the International Criminal Court, wondering how is this legal here and not anywhere else, other than the fact that government was receiving massive tourism revenue because it was the only place that somehow was able to get away with letting people, God forbid, smoke joints. It's pretty bizarre.
Maybe Prince Bernhard smoked weed.
That was probably when he first founded Bilderberg.
Yeah, he had an expansive moment and decided this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, he had a good idea.
Yeah.
Just got corrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they got away with it there, and that's why the breeders that were breeding cannabis somehow all seem to gravitate towards Amsterdam, and so the old breeding companies would breed seeds. I guess that the public wanted, and what you ended up seeing is that sometimes seeds were bred and modified to contain, I'll say, copious amounts of delta-9 THC, which is the only so-called active compound. It's out of all the cannabinoids that we know of, and we know of 100 and
I was going to say like 112 or something different.
You know, there's a bunch
Yeah.
more just found out about, so maybe even 130 now, I'm going to say, but we're dealing with certainly over 100, and 80 that I know a lab that can detect up to 80 of them. So knowing about a cannabinoid and then being able to actually measure it are two different things, because you need to pay for that profile to find the cannabinoid. And so you've got proprietary lab, there's money.
Are there proprietary rights and patents on these strains?
There are, and even on the particular compounds. It's
Did
the
you ever
cannabis
think that was
business-
laughable to patent nature?
I found it always rather disgusting. I look at what General Electric. I used to work for GE Capital Realty Group back in the day, and when I found out that they were purchasing the patents to the DNA of most of the essential life on Earth,
Yeah.
with plans to clone it elsewhere, had a chilling effect. But that's what's been going on, and that's what the GE's lawyers have been doing at the Supreme Court level in the United States, is incrementally setting the stage for sort of this scary scenario. However, the cannabis breeds, the strains that people like our group, our members, my father, thousands and thousands and thousands of very closely connected, non-corporate motivated medical cannabis community, patients and caregivers that have been brought together over the Harper regime's, basically war on medicine. We got together, we formed clubs, we formed groups, we formed internet groups and Facebook groups, and we've been connected for years and sharing information. So what happens to one of us, in a way, happens to all of us, and you end up being able to motivate. You being able to motivate groups in particular cities where we've seen some major change happen. And so I can point to a few examples over the past few years where I was involved in educating at a municipal level some folks who seemed to have a problem with medical cannabis patients, and they were being stigmatized. And that's because of I'll drop the name, Mark Emery of the world, and some people that are so-called cannabis advocates who you never see a picture of them without a bong in their hand, or without, now the thing is carrying around blowtorches to use a dab rig to vaporize the extracted oil, or so-called shatter, at high temperatures to be able to give yourself a blast of THC that basically puts you out of commission for a little while, blast you into your chair. Now, I suppose if you had a non-epileptic seizure disorder, like a few people I know that need that kind of massive dose before night to get through a sleep without a seizure, is one thing. But to want to fry yourself to that level publicly, I'm not sure. Again, to each their own, what they want to do. Some people hold their breath to get high. Some people have other things that they do. Again, privately, right? But to publicly make a spectacle of oneself that involves an intoxication, when they're using, in my abusing a medicine that I see curing melanoma when it's applied on the face, yeah, it hurts me a little bit. And it hurts me that people get sort of caught up in the coolness of that. And do I want my nephews thinking that that's cool? Hell no. So we have to have adult conversations about this stuff.
So let's talk about your organization a little bit and what you guys are really all about. And
Well,
is that the website that we are flashing occasionally on the screen there?
It's around there.
I see it up there.
Show up. There we go.
Is that it?
Yeah, the Lions Herb Society is a non-governmental organization that formed, I guess the concept for this was formed several years ago when I spent time in Zimbabwe, meeting my brothers and sisters there, and I realized that Zimbabwe, long story short, I like to tell this because I think it's an interesting analogy. I had an impression of Zimbabwe just like I had an impression of marijuana. I thought marijuana would cause brain damage and would cause cancer. and could warp a young mind if it had access too early to marijuana. So I didn't access marijuana until later in my life, and I discouraged, adolescent marijuana use. I thought the word was marijuana. I didn't realize what I know now. Zimbabwe, same thing. It's a dictatorship. It's a anti-white place where the white farmers were killed. Crazy dictator runs it, and everyone is in fear, and they have bogus elections. And I heard all of these things about Zimbabwe. But one thing in the back of my mind was that Bob Marley is one of the huge influences of my life. And I was alive when Bob Marley flew to Zimbabwe in 1980, April 1980, and he was one of the only people who showed up at the independence celebration.
Yeah, he wrote a special song, didn't he?
He sure did, and I know the lyrics to that well. And in that song, brother, you're right, you're so right. And he's talking about Brother Robert Mugabe. We have to fight, we have to fight for our rights. And then he even goes on, he says, Africa liberates same that way. Set it up in a Zimbabwe. And so what and of course the crowd hearing the song for the first time at Independence Day, literally, you can see the video, the old colonial apartheid slavery colors of Great Britain are lowered, and the new republic flag is raised, and the colors red, gold, and green. Red being for the blood spilled in the name of freedom, gold for the resources that the creation put in the earth, and green for the environment which sustains everything. And to celebrate these colors in such a way, a free republic, I thought maybe I should just go and check it out. Bob Marley went, so how bad could it be? And I had dreadlocks at the time. So I went there and indeed was welcomed home by my brothers there, and the rest is history. I found out very quickly, just like cannabis, Zimbabwe had been given a completely wrong name because that was an example of a country that literally became free. They took their freedom from the oppressors who didn't want black people on the high street, and they said, that ain't right. We're going to empower our communities to do our own thing. Then the people of Zimbabwe were so-called, put on the list, and no one would trade with them. When I showed up there, they hadn't seen an international businessman with my color of skin, it looked like, in a long time. So I was treated actually quite nice, very, very, very well. And of course, I saw lots of white business owners running businesses that were... It was a colorblind country. It didn't matter if you were black or white. If you weren't a pig during the colonial days, you had nothing to fear. There were lots of lots of people who acted like pigs of different colors.
Yes.
It's not a color issue, it's what your mind is doing issue, you see, and I learned that going there. So we formed this idea that we could cooperate with, government, corporate, and non-governmental partnerships. We don't have to wait, and this is a Comrade Chimchin, who was the Minister of State while I was first in Zimbabwe. He's the one who put it, I think, so well once. Governments are very good at passing declarations and passing anti-smoking legislation and creating the appearance of a response to a particular issue. But all too often, there's very little on the actual side of implementation that benefits a particular community directly.
Pass rules, but not...
Well, and so he argues it's up to us as community leaders and activists and parents and adults to make our own community. We don't have to wait for the government to come and decide that they're building a bridge for us so that we all get happy that we've got something to work. We can build our own bridge. We don't have to, we can build our own field, and we can build our own industry, and we can find partners who will help us do that. And as long as the government is told what we're doing and given a sufficient, if a government, a regional government, provincial government, federal government has legitimate concerns, why don't we address those and work together instead of always having this confrontational attitude? And so we set it up in a Zimbabwe. We found regional areas that were cannabis friendly because of cultural traditions. We began to work with the Zimbabwe Traditional Healers Association. we sent our people in Zimbabwe out to the African Rasta communities to find out what strains they were growing and how they were using the herb medicinally. And then we're putting all of this information together with our branches in other countries and collecting the ideal strains and doing actual research with, again, partners, corporate partners, who have the labs and the facilities to actually research, analyze, and get these different concentrates that we'll end up with into doses that make sense to people. And we're not able to do that in Canada right now. I hope someday we will. But we've got a green light to go ahead and do that in Zimbabwe and also in some other jurisdictions, actually. So that's what our society does. We have a branch at College in Dufferin where we take members. Members donate to our society. Members then therapeutic. We have therapeutic and non-therapeutic members. A non-therapeutic member would be somebody who doesn't use cannabis therapeutically, has no use for it therapeutically, doesn't want to get high, but believes in, maybe they're a caregiver or maybe they have a loved one who they see the medicine helping. Mm-hmm. So we have members like that who support us. We think that's very important, by the way, that we have a robust membership of people who may not partake, but who support. And if we can educate people like that, to me it's always been very important. Preaching to the choir is very easy to do, but actually reaching out into that other the undecided or the large group of Canadians that maybe have concerns about it based on some misinformation that they've heard, or just don't have the knowledge to understand how the safe application of this medicine really has profound effects. I'll even go one step further and say, I've heard Trudeau say this early in his campaign and it offended me. I heard him say, it's not like I'm going to say that marijuana is a health food. Well, stop. Cannabis is a super health food. Cannabis is actually, I'll say, an essential component to proper human health. Based on the science that I know and based on what Dr. Robert Melamede has been able to teach me over his years of lecturing at University of Colorado, but also publicly at cannabis symposiums all over Earth. And to me, Dr. Bob Melamede is one of the experts on the human endocannabinoid system. And if you ever, Google him or listen to some of his talks, he really puts it down clearly. And he's made me understand that without cannabinoids in your system, you're going to have inflammation, you're going to have problems looking forward. Cannabis deficiency, cannabinoid deficiency is actually a clinical term that can be used to describe a human who does not have sufficient cannabinoids in their system. There are symptoms that in my line of work I actually can see. People who have chronic headache, chronic insomnia, chronic, fatigue, inflammation, often Crohn's-like symptoms, digestive issues, reflux issues, stuff that most, Canadians, I think, would basically say, well, that's sort of old age, these age-related glitches that us older folks have to put up with. Actually,
insurance industry is the one who's using that as an excuse to not pay out.
There you go. But in fact,
all these degenerative illnesses or malnourishments are just a natural body state of an aging body.
Yep. But people who I know who eat cannabis and who take the cannabinoids on their skin, I'm not even talking about smoking it. Smoking it is the least effective way to get cannabinoids into your blood, in my view. The most effective would be oral or dermal application on your skin. Your cannabinoid receptors are in, where your
where you get holy unction.
That's right. In your liver area and in your navel area, just below your belly button. And in these areas, we have very dense cannabinoid receptors. So when we add topical cannabis-infused oil or lotion to these areas, you get a system-wide cannabinoid reaction without a high, or being able to not work or drive. Or what are the dangers of cannabis? No jurisdiction that I've ever looked at data has shown anything other than an inverse injury relationship. What does that mean? That means that people who had cannabis in their system ended up at emergency rooms less than people who did not use cannabis. Maybe they were moving slower. Maybe they were less reluctant to go up that ladder. Maybe they were stuck on the couch, but they weren't showing up at the emergency rooms when they had cannabis. So if you didn't have cannabis in your system and you had anything like caffeine or alcohol or an illicit substance other than cannabis, you were far more likely to end up in the emergency room. First time I saw that study was in Switzerland, but it was a very small sample, and I thought, wow. Then I saw one done at University of Michigan, and then I saw the largest sample ever done of this, and they took data from every single state, a national sample study. All 3 studies, same conclusion: inverse relationship ratio.
And we're witnessing that also, for example, in Colorado with the crime rate.
Crime rate's going down.
So everyone was saying, that, the crime rate's going to go up, the crime rate's going to go up, blah, blah. And they started creating this whole fear and hype campaign around that. But essentially, now that Colorado has been doing this for close to a year, maybe a little over a year now, not only have the crime rates gone down, but in fact, the state has begun making so much money from the program that they're actually talking about giving money back to the people.
Sure.
Can you address the utopian aspect of the Zimbabwe model and how in Canada we would face difficulty of having that community buy-in when people in Ontario, for example, that are purporting to want to take this issue on, people like George Smitherman, Ernie Eves, former chief of police in York Region, Armin Labarge, how people that at one time were pro putting the clamp down on the product in the law enforcement guise are now the people that want to be the leaders or the profiteers of the delivery of a cannabis model. Can you address how that could provide tension?
Yeah, I know what you're asking, and it's I've talked to Rick Simpson about this on several occasions, and it again, to me, it's a shame to see profit in medicine. And call me old school, but I'll go back to the Hippocratic Oath, okay? Let's look at the oath. Apparently doctors still take it, but it's meaningless. The most important key, and this is like when I give someone consulting advice, I give several stages of a scenario that I recommend that get taken, but often someone only takes 1 or 2 pieces of advice that they like. They omit the other ones, and they expect the conclusion that I predicted. Well, the Hippocratic Oath is the same thing. You can't cherry pick from that oath. It's designed to serve a purpose, and a key part of that oath is that there's no profit to be allowed in any way in medicine. So if you're going to call yourself a healer, you can't put profit in that. As soon as you add profit to the notion of healing, you've just bastardized the whole thing.
Exactly.
And although, and I'm not trying to say that we all need to sell our possessions and move to an island together, I'm saying that the healers need to be healers and profiteers need to be profiteers. Now, is there a way for both to coexist? I would have to think so, right? And I look at indigenous populations. I look at, you mentioned the people of Ontario. Well, the first people of Ontario, they're people that I work with, the Mohawk people, right? The Mohawk people used the shores of this great lake as a hunting ground, as a summer paradise for generations, right? Under a treaty where other nations could also use this land we call Toronto as a place that, as long as you weren't profiting from your extraction of the resources here, you were taking what you need, you're not being, again, gross about it. It didn't matter what nation you were from, really. If you were here and you weren't bearing arms, you were welcome to be here. No one owned it. It wasn't anyone's to surrender. But colonialism, just like in Zimbabwe, the very same people, as a matter of fact, the New England company, to convert the heathens to the good word of Jesus, was the excuse to round everyone up into residential school and beat the language out of them and beat the traditions of eating these ancient grains, including cannabis and corn, bean, and squash as their protein, and start to eat oatmeal. They call the mush hole, the first residential school, they call it the mush hole because they used to eat, worm-infested mush. That's what the children were given, rather than their traditional grains, which would have, of course, prevented diabetes. So it really is an intentional attack on not just now us being the so-called descendant of these immigrants, but was an attack on by the very same people in very many of the same ways for generations. So to break that cycle, I think we have to have these types of conversations, and I hope people are ready to listen. It's not easy.
Now, we're going to have to wrap this up very shortly here, but I just want to, we got the website up there, and I just, like you mentioned, there's two people can participate. There's, I forget what you said. But
therapeutic and non-therapeutic.
So people who might want to join the society, like what, do you want to just tell what they can get as a therapeutic member, for example?
Well, therapeutic members either have, there are a number of people who have old medical cannabis production licenses. People like my father, for example, and myself, who got doctor approved under an old program. So the doctor signed our prescription for a certain amount of cannabis that we are able to cultivate ourselves, and there's a formulation of how much you're able to have. Our members, such as myself, who are in that category, produce cannabis organically, our own strains according to our own uses, and then share that with other members who aren't able to produce it. So we do that in a cooperative fashion, where if a member has cannabis that they've harvested, that they are willing to share, they'll make that available to our collective, and then other members will then have access to that cannabis to try. We make extracts. Members make extracts, olive oil, infused honey, all sorts of different, the juicing of the raw leaves even, indeed. And then that is available to other members who come. So it's private. It's not open to the public. You can't get away without having, you need to have a therapeutic purpose to access the cannabis, and you do that either with a valid doctor's certificate, making a declaration. We don't insist that patients who need to access medical cannabis go onto a government list. That's not right. Matter of fact, there are a number of members who do a lot of international travel and would be prohibited from entering the United States by appearing as a drug seeker based on information that we know has been shared in the past.
Has that information been shared between Health Canada and, say, Border Services?
I have not just one, but
you have anecdotal stories?
Yeah, I have anecdotal evidence of that exact scenario happening not once but multiple times.
It's government malfeasance.
It's hard to say. I don't know whether the Americans, what sort of access Americans have through official versus unofficial channels to information that they may want to have. So I'm not going to presuppose that there's just a plug of information, health information being leaked south of the border. Although that could be the case. It wouldn't surprise me given what the last regime used to do in terms of information, spying and sharing.
But they did send out a mail out to each and every Health Canada participant in the medical marijuana program, out in the mail with the return address indicating the mail was coming from the Health Canada medical marijuana program.
So that's
a privacy breach.
Yep. There's been a privacy breach of that nature. There have been other privacy breaches as well. I know some medical access patients who received other medical patients' confidential information in the mail, for example. It's just a history of nightmares. So talking about what we do is we pride ourselves on offering our members what I call dignified access. And that is that we offer people dignity so that they don't have to go to a street dealer to get a medicine.
That sounds like a great idea. We have to do less things with the government's involvement. The government needs to get out of people's lives more and more.
Absolutely.
So,
And we have the right to demand it.
yeah. So let's
Why
do
do
it.
they want to be in your life?
I don't know, Patricia.
You're so interesting. I think that's what it is. They're not as interesting as the people they want to be interested in.
Right. You could have something there. Okay, let's wrap it up. But people can go to the website, right? lionsherbsociety.com.
Yes.
And, uh-oh, we're getting a call. We're wrapping the show up, people. Well, we'll
And he's decided he's going to stop
I'm
talking.
not here.
we're going to wrap this up right now, and we'll take this call offline. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time, thatchannel.com.
I'm not here.
That channel.
Right here, baby.
Okay. 2 o'clock. Okay, awesome. I'll see you.
Colors are like that.
Red, gold, and green. Remember that?
Red, gold, and green. Red, gold, and green.